My Gavanin! Merry Christmas in Sindarin. I'm the Tolkien Shed, and today we'll have a loose follow-up to one of the previous videos, to the unbearable protagonist. That is Galadriel. The Rings of Power present her story in a simplified way, at best, and more often just forget it or change it. We'll discover today the real story of Galadriel, and what Tolkien established about her. It has to be noted that in Tolkien's text there are some differences, and the story differs in different texts. But those changes are not of much concern for us today, because no matter at which variant we look, the story is still different from the one that the Rings of Power presents, and it is still undeniably better. Let's start from the first age, and let's look at what the show tells us about Galadriel in that time. She lived in Valinor, and she was bullied by some elven kids, but she had the support of her brother Finrod. When the two trees of Valinor were destroyed by Morgoth, she, with the other elves, left Valinor to go to Middle-earth and fight the enemy. There she lost her brother. And now let's hear a little longer story by Tolkien. Galadriel was granddaughter of one of the elven kings of Finwë, who was the leader of the Noldor, one of 3 clans of the elves in the Blessed Realm. Galadriel was his granddaughter and the daughter of Finarfin. So it's a little strange that she was bullied, being, well, from a royal family, but, let's give it a benefit of the doubt and move on. Let's have a look at her family, at, for example, her 3 brothers. 3, you ask? Well, the show shows us only Finrod. It totally forgets Aegnor and Angrod, but they were there. They went to Middle-earth and were killed there. Their death was equally important to Galadriel. That's equally important to the death of Finrod, but, well, maybe they weren't needed there. Let's move on. But here comes a part that cannot be ignored. Let's tell the story of the Silmarils. Silmarils were the creation of the eldest of Finwë's sons, of Fëanor. They contained the very lights of the trees of Valinor themselves. They were the greatest achievement of the elves, the greatest artifact ever created. Everyone desired them. So, it is not surprising that when Morgoth destroyed the 2 trees of Valinor, he also stole the 3 jewels. It is the very reason for the Noldor leaving Valinor. Fëanor, enraged by this theft, swore an oath to kill everybody that would dare to take the Silmarils for themselves. His sons also made that oath, and it had great consequences in the future. It's you could argue that it is the most important event for the elves that happened in the First Age, the most consequential one. It led to great suffering, but also to great valiant deeds. And, well, the consequences of that oath were seen soon after. And the show, by not telling us the story of the Silmarils, of the oath, misses an opportunity not only to tell the true story of the First Age, but also to establish Galadriel's character. because she didn't make the oath. She left Valinor. She wanted to have a realm of her own in Middle-earth. She was one of the leaders of the Noldor, but she didn't make the oath. And she also didn't participate in the first kinslaying that happened in Valinor. The Valars, the great powers of the world, forbade Noldor to leave, but they didn't listen. They wanted to take the ships of some other elves that dwelt in Valinor, but those elves opposed them. So Fëanor and some of the Noldor attacked them and took the ships for themselves. And Galadriel didn't take part in that. We see that she had ambition matching the one of Fëanor, but she didn't have his madness, his ruthlessness, his vengefulness, or his anger. Let's compare it to what the Rings of Power show us. And, we see that she's a completely different character. In the show, she is driven by vengeance. There is almost nothing more to her motivation. Where is the real Galadriel? Certainly not in that show. After the first kinslaying, Fëanor reached Middle-earth, and the other Noldor, who didn't go back to Valinor, had to take a dangerous path. They had to cross the dangerous ice desert of Helcaraxe. And Galadriel and Finrod were the ones that led the elves through this dangerous journey. They finally reached Middle-earth, and here ends the great acts of Galadriel in the First Age. She settled down in Doriath. There she met her future husband, Celeborn. Her brothers were killed in the wars that followed, and she certainly didn't hunt Sauron in revenge. She waited, and when the Valars came to defeat Morgoth, she waited. But after the elves were granted the right to return to Valinor, she stayed in Middle-earth. According to some versions of this story, she stayed there out of her love for Celeborn. That's the story we see in Silmarillion. But according to some later additions, she was forbidden to return, just as other leaders of the Noldor. And the opportunity to return came only after she resisted the temptation to take the One Ring in the Third Age. But no matter which version we choose, we meet Galadriel at the end of the First Age, staying in Middle-earth. Now let's discuss the Second Age, and let's start with what the Rings of Power say about Galadriel in that time. First of all, we see that Galadriel is hunting for Sauron. It is what begins the story of the Rings of Power and leads to all the events that follow. We'll not discuss those events, but we'll compare some elements. Now let's move to what Tolkien says about Galadriel. At the beginnings of the Second Age, Galadriel and Celeborn got married. And right here at the beginning we see a great difference between the real story and what we see in the Rings of Power, because according to the show, Celeborn is dead. So no wedding, I guess. And not much place for Celebrian, Galadriel's daughter, who is born 300 years later. Well, the fact that Celeborn is dead is a spit on the lore, but also a spit on logic, because he has to be there. He appears in The Lord of the Rings. He greets the Fellowship of the Ring. But, well, the show just ignores that. So, what more can be said? Let's move on to some later events. Galadriel lived for some time in Eregion, and it was there that appeared a mysterious person called Annatar. Galadriel was one of those who did not trust this newcomer, and rightly so, because it was Sauron under a fake face who tried to deceive the craftsman that lived in Eregion. Galadriel was his main adversary, but Sauron soon gained much power over the leader of the craftsmen, over Celebrimbor, who banished Galadriel. She reached Lorien from Moria and for some time lived there, but after some time Sauron's treachery was revealed. The creation of One Ring became a known fact. So Galadriel was again an advisor to Celebrimbor, and she was the one that advised for the 3 rings that belonged to the elves to be hidden. And she received one of them. It was Nenya. And, she kept this ring in hiding until the end of the Second Age. Well, it is only right to point out that in the show, Galadriel is the one that is responsible for Sauron's coming to power. So, well, it's totally different. Now let's just finish Galadriel's story by stating some facts about her in the Third Age. There is not much more before the events in The Lord of the Rings, but it is not less important. She was a person of great influence in the Third Age. She was one of the wise, one of those who sat in the White Council. She influenced kings, elves, and wizards, especially Gandalf. She was his friend, and she was responsible for many events that happened during the Third Age, and she was at the same time ruling Lorien, and her reign and her husband's began in the Third Age. Those are the basic facts that maybe are useful to know before we enter into the events in The Lord of the Rings. I assume that they are more known, so we'll leave Galadriel's true story here. Let's just sum it up. Galadriel is a character of great ambition. It is because of her ambition that she comes to Middle-earth, but she stays there because of her love for her husband and for everything that was achieved in that land, and for respect for all of that was lost. She possesses great wisdom and great kindness, and none of that is visible in the Rings of Power. She is a completely different character. Not only is her history changed, but the story of her race is different because some key elements are ignored. So, is it the same character? I wouldn't say so. Those are completely different. The one that we know from the show is vengeful, and vengeance is everything that she knows, except for cruelty. So, maybe a bit of advice, if I may. If you create a character, maybe create somebody of your own creation, not steal someone's name and change this character to match your vision, and maybe, just maybe, make them more likable. Because Galadriel that Tolkien created is loved almost universally, and the one that we see in the Rings of Power is the complete opposite of that. Well, and that would be it for today's video. I hope that you like this little bit different format. And now all that is left is some announcements. This is the last video in this year. I'll return in 2023. And who knows, maybe there will be some new series with the coming of the new year. I certainly hope to see you there. And now I have to wish you blessed time, blessed Christmas. And I have to thank everyone that subscribed, everyone that comments, everyone that enjoys this content. I hope to see you again very soon. Fare you well. Nova Year.
Subscribe right now, you little hobbitses.